Yo, nine lives to my fam? You're such a Gerber. Alright, that's my Toronto accent. Do I fit in? Dude, I might just move to Canada. Would moving to Canada fix my issues? Who knows? Who knows? I gotta wait till I'm 23, and I think I need to get, like, a couple more ex-boyfriends for that. Which, honestly, I could speedrun that. I could speedrun getting, like, 3 more ex-boyfriends, and then be on my actual Ramona Flowers arc. Not really, I don't want to do that. I just ate some falafels, so, you know, I might have to leave. I might have to leave unexpectedly, because the Trader Joe's falafels, ooh, the Trader Joe's falafels. Anyway, and these things, it's like an energy drink for your eyes. I got this for Christmas. I don't know. I, like, took a crazy nap, and I feel like I just look very tired, so, I mean, I might as well read some Anna Karenina, then I'm gonna make some tacos, and then either paint or watch TV. My friend was gonna give me his iPad, but he never did. Please! I need your iPad so I can draw. I don't feel like drawing on my, like, busted computer. Okay. Sorry for the long intro. Anna Karenina, Chapter 4. The highest Petersburg society, and I'm still sick, guys, so I'm sorry if my voice isn't all the way there. The highest Petersburg society is all really one. All who belong to it know and even visit one another. But this large circle has its subdivisions. Anna Arkdavievna Karenina had friends and close connections in 3 different sets. One of these was her husband's official set, consisting of his colleagues and subordinates, who in most varied and capricious ways were connected and separated by social conditions. Anna found it hard now to recall the feeling of almost religious respect she had at first felt for these people. Now she knew them all as well as the inhabitants of a provincial town know one another. She knew the habits and weaknesses of each of them, and where the shoe pinched this or that foot, she knew their relations to one another and to the governing center. She knew who sided with whom, and how and by what means each supported himself, and who agreed or disagreed with whom and about what. But in spite of guys, what is this word? Oh, admonitions, sorry. But in spite of admonitions and advice from the Countess Lydia Ivanova, this bureaucratic circle of male interests could not interest Anna, and she avoided it. Based, though. Dude, I've never gotten along with, like, any of my ex-boyfriends' friend groups. They are all really annoying and weirdos. And you gotta, like, lock in and realize, if the boyfriend's friend group is, like, all dusties, then you gotta run. If his friend group is full of a bunch of, like, low-key womanizing dusties, then you gotta run. You gotta run. You actually gotta run. So, you know, if everyone else in his friend group is, like, single, you gotta run. But, whatever, okay. Another circle with which Anna was intimate was that through which Karenin had made his career. The center of that circle was the Countess Lydia Ivanova. It consisted of elderly, plain, and philanthropic and pious women, and clever, well-educated, ambitious men. One of the clever men who belonged to it called it the conscience of Petersburg society. Karenin set great value on this circle, and Anna, who knew how to get on with everyone, had, during the first part of her life in Petersburg, made friends in it too. But now, on her return from Moscow, that circle became unbearable to her. It seemed to her that she, and all of them, were only pretending, and she felt so bored and uncomfortable in that society that she visited Lydia Ivanova as rarely as possible. I'm nothing like y'all, fish jumping out of water. The third circle with which Anna was connected was society and the accepted meaning of the word. The society of balls, dinner parties, brilliant toilettes, the society which clung to the court with one hand lest it should sink to the demi-monde. For this is the members... I'm gonna sneeze. I'm so sorry, guys. For this the members of that society thought they despised, though its tastes were not only similar but identical with their own. Anna was connected with this set through the Princess Betsy Tervaskia, the wife of her cousin, who had an income of 120,000 rubles a year, and who, from the time Anna first appeared in society, had particularly liked her, made much of her, and drawn her into her own set, making fun of that to which the Countess Lydia Ivanova belonged. I don't know what voice to give Betsy. I'll give her a mean girl voice. When I'm old and ugly, I'll become like that, Betsy used to say. But for a young and beautiful woman, it is too early to settle down in an almshouse. At first, Anna had avoided the Princess Tervatsky set as much as she could, because it demanded more expense than she could afford, and also because she really approved more of the other set. But after her visit to Moscow, all this was reversed. She avoided her moral friends and went into grand society. There she saw Vronsky, and experienced a tremulous joy when meeting him. She met him most frequently at Betsy's, who was a Vronsky herself and his cousin. Vronsky went everywhere when he had a chance of meeting Anna, and spoke to her of his love whenever he could. She gave him no encouragement, but every time they met there, sprang up that feeling of animation which had seized her on the train on the morning when she first saw him. She was aware that when they met, joy lit up her eyes and drew her lips into a smile. But she could not hide the expression of that joy. At first, Anna sincerely believed that she was displeased with him for allowing himself to persecute her, but soon after her return from Moscow, having gone to a party where she expected to meet him, but to which he did not come, she clearly realized by the sadness that overcame her that she had been deceiving herself, and that this persecution supplied the whole interest of her life. A famous prima donna was giving her second performance, and all high society was at the opera house. Vronsky, from the front row of the stalls, seeing his cousin, went to her box without waiting for the interval. Yo, chill. Ah! My eyes. This is not working. My eyes are like... My eye bags are still baggy. Okay. Why didn't you not come to dinner? She said, adding with a smile, and so that only he could hear. I am amazed at the clairvoyance of lovers. She was not here, but come in after the opera. Vronsky looked at her inquiringly. She nodded, and he thanked her by a smile and sat down beside her. And how well I remember your ridicule, continued the Princess Betsy, who took particular pleasure in following the progress of this passion. What has become of it all? You are caught, my dear fellow. I wish for nothing better than to be caught, replied Vronsky with his calm, good-natured smile. To tell the truth, if I complain at all, it is only of not being caught enough. I am beginning to lose hope. What hope can you have? Said Betsy, offended on her friend's behalf. Entendez-nous. But in her eyes little sparks twinkled, which said that she understood very well, and just as he did, what hope he might have. None whatever, said Vronsky, laughing and showing his closest teeth. Excuse me, he added, taking from her hand the opera glasses, and he set to work to scan across her bare shoulder the row of boxes opposite. I'm afraid I'm becoming ridiculous. He knew very well that if he ran no risk of appearing ridiculous either in Betsy's eye or in the eyes of society people generally. He knew very well that in their eyes the role of the disappointed lover of a maiden or of any single woman might be ridiculous, but the role of a man who was pursuing a married woman and who made it the purpose of his life at all costs to draw her into adultery was one which had it in something beautiful and dignified, and could never be ridiculous. So it was with a proud, glad smile lurking under his mustache that he put down the opera glasses and looked at his cousin. And why would you not come to dinner? She said admiringly. I must tell you about that. I was engaged, and with what do you think? I'll give you 100 or 1,000 guesses, and you won't find out. I was making peace between a husband and a fellow who had insulted his wife. Yes, really. Well, and did you succeed? Nearly. You must tell me all about it, she said, rising. Come back in the next interval. I can't. I'm going to the French theater. What? From Nilsson? Asked Betsy, quite horrified, though she could not have distinguished Nilsson's voice from that of a chorus girl. It can't be helped. I have an appointment there in connection with the same peacemaking of mine. Blessed are the peacemakers, for they will be saved, said Betsy, remembering that she heard someone say something like that. Well, then sit down and tell me about it. And she sat down again. Chapter 5. It's rather improper, but so charming that I long to tell it, said Vronsky, gazing at her with laughing eyes. I shan't mention names. So much the better. I shall guess them. Well, then listen. 2 gay young fellows were out driving. Officers of your regiment, of course. I didn't say officers, but just 2 young men who had been lunging. Translate that, not wisely, but too well. It may be they were on their way to dine with a comrade, and in the highest spirits, they see that a pretty woman in a hired sledge is passing them, looking at them and laughing and nodding to them. At any rate, they think so. Of course, they go off after her, galloping full speed. To their surprise, the lovely one stops at the door at the very house they are going to. She runs up to the top flat. They only manage to see a pair of red lips between a short veil and lovely little feet. Oh my god, my nose. You tell it with so much feeling that I think you must be talking about yourself. That's not what I said. That's not the fucking thing at all. Why did I misread it? Okay. You tell it with so much feeling that I think you yourself must have been one of the 2. And what did you say to me just now? Well, the young men go into the comrade's flat. He was given a farewell dinner. There, they may really have drunk rather too much, as always happens at the farewell dinners. At dinner, they inquire who lives in the top flat. No one knows, but their host footman, in answer to their question whether girls lived there, replied that there are lots of them thereabouts. After dinner, the young men go into the host's study to compose a letter to the fair stranger, and having written one full of passion and containing a declaration, they carry it upstairs themselves in order to explain anything that might not be clear in the letter. Why do you tell me such horrors? Well, they ring. A maid opens the door. They give her the letter and assure her that they are both so much in love that they will die at once on the doorstep. The maid, quite bewildered, carried on the negotiations. Suddenly, a gentleman with sausage-shaped whiskers and as red as a lobster appears, announces that no one but his wife lives in the flat, and turns them both out. How do you know he had sausage-shaped whiskers, as you say? You just listen. Today I want to reconcile them. Well, what happened? This is the most interesting part. It turns out that the happy couple are a titular counselor and a titular counseloress. The titular counselor lodges a complaint, and I turn into a peacemaker. And what a peacemaker! I assure you, Talleyrand was nothing to me. What was the difficulty? You shall hear. We duly apologized. We are in despair. We beg to be forgiven for our unfortunate mistake. The titular counselor with his sausages begins to thaw, but also wishes to express his feelings, and as soon as he begins to express them, he begins to get excited and grows insulting, and again, I have to set all my diplomatic talents in motion. I agree that they acted badly, but beg you to consider that it was a mistake. Consider their youth, besides which the young men had just dined. You understand? They repent from the bottom of their hearts, and I ask you to forgive their fault. The titular counselor again softens. I am willing to forgive them, Count, but you must understand that my wife, a respectable woman, has been subjected to the rudeness and insults of these hobbledehoys, these scoundrels. And you must remember that one of the hobbledehoys is standing there, and I have to reconcile them. Again, I set my diplomacy going, and again, just as the whole business should be concluded, my titular counselor flies into a rage, gets red, his sausages stick out, and again, I dissolve into diplomatic subtlety. Oh, you must hear this, cried Betsy, laughing and turning into a lady who was just entering the box. He has made me laugh so. Well, bonne chance, she added, giving Vronsky a finger that was not engaged in holding her fan, and with a movement of her shoulders, making the bodice of her dress that had risen a little slip down again, that she might be befittingly nude. Dang, we got some Rule 34 in here. Or returning to the front of the box, to the glare of gaslight and the gaze of all eyes. This is not staying on my face. Stay on my face. Okay, I'm taking these off. Why do I look sick? Because I am. I look like Barbara Chandler. I look like Barbara Chandler. I look like Barbara. Oh my god. Turn me loose, you silly goose. Okay. Vronsky went to the French theater, where he really had to see the commander of his regiment, who never omitted a single performance there, to talk over this reconciliation business which had occupied and amused him for the last 3 days. Petritsky, whom Vronsky was fond of, was mixed up in the affair, and so was young Prince Kedrov, a first-rate fellow and a capital comrade, who had lately joined the regiment. Above all, the interests of the regiment were involved. Both officers belonged to Vronsky's squadron. Titular Councillor Winden had been there to see the commander and had lodged a complaint against the officers who had insulted his wife. His young wife, so Winden declared, he had been married 6 months, had been to church with her mother, and suddenly feeling unwell as a result of her interesting condition, was unable to stand any longer and took the first good sledge she could find. These officers in their sledge raced after her. She became frightened, and feeling still more unwell, ran up the stairs to her flat. Winden himself, having returned from his office and hearing the front door bell and voices, went out, saw the tipsy officers with the letter, and hustled them out. He requested that they should be severely punished. "No, say what you like," the commander remarked to Vronsky, whom he had invited to his house. "Petritsky is becoming impossible. Not a week passes without some scandal. That councillor will not let the matter rest. He will go further with it." Vronsky realized how ungrateful a task it was, that a duel was out of the question, and that everything must be done to soften the titular councillor and hush up the affair. The CEO had called the titular councillor. The CEO had called Vronsky, and just because he knew him to be honorable and able, and above all, a man who valued the honor of the regiment. After discussing the matter, they decided that Vronsky should go with Petritsky and Kedrov to apologize to the councillor. Both the commander and Vronsky were aware that Vronsky's name and his badge as his aide-de-camp to the emperor ought to greatly help in softening the titular councillor's feelings, and really these things had a partial effect, but the result of the peacemaking still remained doubtful, as Vronsky had explained. Having reached the French theater, Vronsky went out into the foyer with the CEO, and informed him of the success or lack of success. After considering the whole question, the commander decided to let the matter drop, but for amusement he asked Vronsky for particulars of the interview. I could not help laughing for a long time as he listened to the description of how the titular councillor suddenly again flared up at the recollection of some incident of the affair, and how Vronsky maneuvered so as to retire just at the last half-word of reconciliation, pushing Petritsky before him. "Ah, bad business, but most amusing. Kedrov cannot fight that good man. And so, was he in a great rage?" repeated the commander, laughing. "But what do you think of Claire this evening? Wonderful!" he went on, referring to the new French actress. "However often one sees her, she is new each day. Only the French can do that." Okay. I'll read one more chapter. I'll read one more chapter. This is pretty short. Princess Betsy went home without waiting for the end of the last act. She had scarcely time to go to her dressing room, but put powder on her long pale face and rub it off again, smarten herself up, and order tea to be served in the big drawing room, before one carriage after another began to arrive at the door of her immense house on the great Morskaya. The visitors passed beneath the broad portico, and the massive hall porter, who in the mornings read a newspaper behind the glass panes of the front door for the edification of passers-by, now noiselessly opened this enormous door to admit them. Almost at one and the time that the hostess, her hair rearranged and her face freshened up, entered at one door, and the visitors at another of the large dark-walled drawing-room, with its thick carpets and brightly lit table, shining in the candlelight with white tablecloth, silver samovar, and translucent china. "Yo, China mention!" Okay, sorry. The hostess sat down beside the samovar and took off her gloves. The chairs being moved by the aid of the unobtrusive footman, the company settled down, separating into 2 circles, one with the hostess round the samovar, the other at the opposite end of the room, round the wife of an ambassador, a beautiful woman with black, sharply outlined eyebrows and a black velvet dress. The conversation in both circles, as always happens at first, hesitated for a few minutes, was interrupted by greetings, recognitions, and offers of tea, and seemed to be seeking something to settle on. "She is wonderfully good as an actress. One sees that she has studied Kalbach," remarked an attaché in the circle round the ambassador's wife. "Did you notice how she fell?"
Oh, please, don't let us talk about Nilsson. It's impossible to say anything dumb about her,
said a stout, red-faced, fair-haired lady who wore an old silk dress and had no eyebrows and no chignon. This was the Princess myagaka, notorious for her simplicity and the roughness of her manners, and nicknamed l'enfant terrible. The Princess myagaka was seated midway between the two circles, listening and taking part in the conversation of both.
This very same sentence about Kabash is repeated by the 3 different people today, as if by arrangement. That sentence, I don't know why, seemed to please them very much. The conversation was broken by this remark, and it became necessary to find another topic. Tell us something amusing, but not malicious,
said the ambassador's wife, a great adept at that kind of elegant conversation which the English call small talk, turning to the attaché, who was also at a loss what subject to start.
People say it is very difficult, and that only what is malicious is amusing,
he began with a smile.
But I will try, if you will give me a theme. The theme is everything. Once one has a theme, it is easy to embroider on it. I often think that the famous talkers of the last century would find it difficult to talk cleverly nowadays. We are all so tired of the clever things.
That was said long ago, interrupted the ambassador's wife laughingly. The conversation had begun very prettily. But just, all these people are autistic, bro. What do you mean, bruh? The conversation had begun very prettily, but just because it was too pretty, it languished again. They had to return to the one sure and never-failing resource, slander. Wait, me when I gossip. Low-key, like, they're just like us. They love gossip. They love gossip.
Don't you think there is something Louis Queen's about Tushkevich?
Said the attaché, glancing at a handsome, fair-haired young man who stood by the tea table.
Oh, yes, he matches the drawing room. That is why he comes here so often.
This conversation did not flag, since it hinted at what could not be spoken of in this room, namely at the relations existing between Tushkevich and their hostess. Around the hostess and the samovar, the conversation, after flickering for some time in the way between their 3 inevitable themes, the latest public news, the theater, and criticism of one's neighbor, also caught on when it got to the last of these themes, slander.
Have you heard that Maltskave woman, also not the daughter but the mother, is having a dyeable rose costume made for herself?
You don't mean to say so. How delicious!
I wonder that she, with her common sense, for she's not stupid, does not see how ridiculous she makes herself.
Everyone had something disparaging to say about the unfortunate Maltsheva, and the conversation began cracking merry like a kindling bonfire. The Princess Betsy's husband, a fat, good-natured man, an enthusiastic collector of engravings, hearing his wife had visitors, entered the drawing room before going to his club. Stepping silently on the thick carpet, he approached the Princess myagaka. How do you like Nilsson? I don't know what voice to give him. How do you like Nilsson? He inquired.
After you steal on my black man, how you frighten me! She said in reply. Please don't talk to me about the opera. You know nothing of music. I had better to descend to your level and talk about your myagaka and engravings. Come now, tell me... Tell me about the treasures you have picked up lately in the rag fair.
Shall I show you? But you don't understand them.
Yes, let me see them. I have learned those. What is their name? The Bakers. They have some splendid engravings. They showed them to us.
What? Have you been to the Schusbergs? Oh, wait. What? Have you been to the Schusbergs? Asked the hostess from her place by the samovar.
I have my share. They asked my husband to be to dinner, and I was told that the sauce allowed at the dinner cost 1,000 rubles.
Said the Princess myagaka loudly, feeling that everybody was listening.
And a very nasty sauce it was, too. Something green. We had to invite them, and I gave them a sauce that cost 85 kopecks and satisfied everyone. I can't afford 1,000 ruble sauces.
She is unique, said the hostess. Wonderful. said someone else. The effect produced by the Princess Miyagaka's words was always the same, and the secret of that effect lay in the fact that although she often, as at that moment, spoke not quite to the point, her words were simple and had a meaning. In the society in which she lived, words of that kind produced the effect of a most witty joke. The Princess Miyagaka did not understand why her words had such an effect, but was aware that they did and availed herself of it. Wait, my neurodivergent queen. I kind of kin her now. As while she was speaking, everybody listened to her, and the conversation in the circle around the ambassador's wife stopped. The hostess wished to make one circle of the whole company, and turning to the ambassador's wife said, "Will you really not have a cup of tea? You should come and join us here." "No, we are very comfortable here," replied the ambassador's wife, smiling, and she continued the interrupted conversation. It was a very pleasant conversation. They were disparaging the Karenins, husband and wife.
"Anna has changed very much since our trip to Moscow. There is something strange about her," said a friend of Anna's.
"The chief change is she had brought back with her the shadow of Alexis Vronsky, said the ambassador's wife.
"Well, why not? Grimm has a fable called The Man Without a Shadow, about a man who lost his shadow as a punishment for something or the other. I can never understand why it was such a punishment, but for a woman to be without a shadow can't be pleasant." "Yes, but a woman with a shadow generally ends badly," said Anna's friend.
"A marine on your tongue!"
suddenly remarked the Princess Miyagaka, hearing these words.
"Anna Karenina is a splendid woman. I don't like her husband, but I'm very fond of her."
"Why don't you like her husband? He is such a remarkable man," said the ambassador's wife. "My husband says there are few statesmen like him in Europe."
"My husband tells me the same, but I don't believe it,"
replied the Princess Miyagaka.
"If our husbands didn't talk, we should see things as they really are, and it's my opinion that Karenina is simply stupid. I say it in a whisper. This does not make everything quite clear. Formerly, when I was told to consider him wise, I kept trying to, and thought I was stupid myself because I was unable to perceive his wisdom. But as soon as I said to myself, he's stupid, only in a whisper, of course, it all became quite clear. Don't you think so?"
"How malicious you are today."
"Not at all. I have no choice. One of us is stupid, and you know it's impossible to say so of oneself."
"No one is satisfied."
I hope she shows up in other chapters. I hope she shows up.
"No one is satisfied with his position, but everyone is satisfied with his wit,"
remarked the attaché, quoting some French lines.
"That's it. That's just it,"
rejoined the Princess Miyagaka, turning quickly toward him.
"But the point is, I won't abandon Anna to you. She's so excellent, so charming. What is she to do if everyone is in love with her and follows her about like a shadow?"
"But I don't even think of blaming her,"
Anna's friend said, justifying herself.
"If one follows us like a shadow, does that not prove we have a right to judge her?"
Having snubbed Anna's friend so handsomely, the Princess Miyagaka rose with the ambassador's wife and joined those at the table, where there was a general conversation about the King of Prussia. "Whom were you backbiting there?" asked Betsy.
"The Karenins! The princess was characterizing..."
Oh wait, no, that's the Karenins. The princess was characterizing Karenin, replied the ambassador's wife with a smile, seating herself at the table. "It's a pity we did not hear it," said the hostess, glancing at the door. "Ah, here you are at last," she added, smiling and addressing Vronsky as he entered the room. Vronsky not only knew everybody in the room, but saw them all every day, so he entered in the calm manner of one who rejoins those from whom he had parted only a short time before. "Where do I come from?" he said in reply to the ambassador's wife. "There is no help for it. I must confess that I come from the theater booth. I have been there 100 times, and always with fresh pleasure. Excellent. I know it's a disgrace, but at the opera I go to sleep, while at the booth I stay to the last minute enjoying it. Tonight..." And he named a French actress and was about to tell them something about her when the ambassador's wife stopped him with a mock alarm. "Please don't talk about those horrors." "All right, I won't, especially as everybody knows those horrors."
"And everybody would go there if it were considered the thing as the opera is,"
put in the Princess Miyagaka. Okay, I'm gonna eat some tacos.